Hi. The Rogue Trader rulebook includes some incredible artwork, not least the cover image, which is the classic last stand of the Crimson Fists. And within, there are many more wonderful images. And in some cases, the artists seem to have really let their imaginations run wild. For example, there is this image here, which shows some Space Marines in Mark VI power armour, fighting it against somebody who's using a rather unconventional walking machine. Very bizarre appearance to it, completely asymmetrical. And I thought it'd be a good idea to actually create a model of this as it might have appeared if it were used on a Rogue Trader vintage battlefield. As usual, I began by making a 1:1 scale sketch of the model that I wanted to produce, and I based this largely around the size of this hatchway here being about the size of a person at the Rogue Trader scale. So from that I produced this side and this front elevation. Now already there's a bit of a hitch, as you can see, because I don't have any feet on these sketches, because you don't see a foot in this image. In fact, you only see the front and this one side from about the knee upwards. So all of the other details are ones I'm going to have to fill in myself later on. But with these sketches completed, I of course moved on to my card prototype. So we have the body, and there is the head, with this sort of box assembly just beneath it. And then once I'd got this card prototype done, so I knew what it would look like in 3 dimensions, I moved on to my plasticard core. And here we go. And already I'm taking some artistic license because I've put in the tops of some paint pots to represent the feet, and I'll be adding details to these, of course, to create a more realistic foot later on. But with this core done, it's now time to detail the entire model. Here we have a partially detailed model that shows the details that are actually visible in the original artwork. And you might notice the head at the sides does not include bits that flare out, as are shown on my original sketch, because on closer inspection I actually decided that this was a sort of optical illusion in the original artwork. It wasn't really there. I just thought I was seeing something like that. But on closer study, I decided that the head was just far more of a plain box shape with a few smaller details added. Now, as normal, I've used a lot of plasticard in making these details. The arm at the front is made from some lengths of plastic tubing. The fingers are bits of thick metal wire. The weapons, the chest-mounted and the head-mounted weapons, those are all bits of plastic tubing as well. And there's a bit of computer ribbon cable on the detail on the chest. And now I'm going to have to get more creative and start using some artistic license, because I need to detail the feet to make them look more like feet rather than just the simple cut-off tops of paint pots that they are. And also the left-hand side of the body and head and the rear of the body and head that are currently completely plain also need to be detailed. And here we have the model that includes all the additional details I've added to make up for what couldn't be seen in the original artwork. And once again, I've used quite a few pieces of plastic art, for example, on this doorway here, which mirrors the one on the other side. And then also some more extra plates added on with tiny pieces of plasticard added to make them look like rivets. On the back, I've also added sort of a partial engine block, which again is just a couple of thick pieces of plasticard with some odds and ends glued to it, including a couple of bits of wire for some piping. For the feet, I have simply added some toes using a couple of bits of plastic card for each toe and then filled in the gap using Milliput. Then on the front of the body, I've actually added an extra couple of vision ports which weren't shown in the original artwork, purely because I think it looks better if the crew can see out to operate the arm and the forward gun. I've added an opposable thumb to the hand using the same sort of wire as I used for the fingers. Then on the head, as well as some basic details at the side, I've added another hatch at the back so that crewmen could gain access so they could operate the weapons that are mounted up here. But now that this model is put together, I need to paint it. And that raises the question of which faction should I paint this model to go with? And I have decided that since it was pictured battling against Imperial forces and chaos wasn't really a thing when the original Rogue Trader rulebook was created, I'm going to paint this vehicle up as an Orc Walker. And here is the finished and painted model in its sort of basic Orc colours. This is the colour scheme I use when I'm not trying to associate a model with a particular Orc clan. Now, there is the question, of course, of what sort of vehicle exactly is this? And from its physical size compared to more modern models, I think it is very much similar to vehicles such as Imperial Knights or this Morkanaut in terms of size and weight class, but the firepower that it has doesn't really match these vehicles. It's far more lightly armed. So if I were to actually field this in a battle, I would probably count it as something more like a battle wagon, on the grounds that it's got this primary energy weapon here, which could count as a zap gun, and then we have the three smaller weapons which could each count as big shooters, and then this arm could be a grabber claw. Possibly you could say that the way it stomps its feet could count as a death roller, but in any case this would be equivalent to a battle wagon. And I shall end this video with this shot of how the Walker might have looked at the core of a small Orc force led by the infamous Orc warlord Thrug Bullneck from the days of Rogue Trader. And I hope you've enjoyed this look at how I've turned a piece of artwork from the original rulebook into this three-dimensional model. And thanks for watching. Bye.